Hello and welcome to How Do I video series for Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. My name is Yasmin Katunas and I'm Microsoft Dynamics NAV Escalation Engineer. Throughout this video, I will show you how to use application merge utilities to update NAV application objects. At the end of this video, you will learn how to compare your base application objects and your customized application objects, and you will be familiar with using the update commandlet to update NAV application objects using Delta files produced by compare commandlet. For this scenario, I will be using the PowerShell ISC. So start the tab as administrator. Next, I need to import NAV specific modules. And these can be found in your Role Tailor Client folder on Product DVD. Copy the module, path, and execute. For the purpose of this video, I will be using demo data provided by Application Merge Utilities. These can be found in your Windows PowerShell Scripts folder. So navigate to Application Merge Utilities folder and demo data. Next step is to compare my NAV base application objects with my customized application objects using the compare commandlet provided with Application Merge Utilities. So type compare NAV application object. We need to specify original path, that is the path to my base application objects, and that will be the files contained in original folder of demo data files folder. Next, we'll be providing the modified path, and those are the files contained in modified folder. Finally, we need to provide the delta path, and for that I've created a delta folder, and I'll add the force parameter if I want to avoid being prompted to overwrite existing files. Now let's have a look at the resulting output. I have provided the delta folder as my output folder, so as we can see there are 6 modified files in this folder. Let's have a look at some of these files to understand how the changes are outlined. In code unit 1, for example, we see the original code and the modified code. Quite straightforward change. In the next code unit, we also have original code and modified code marked. To better understand these changes, I will also use an external tool called kdiff3 to compare these two objects. So I'll just run the tool, type kdiff3, and specify the base and the B folder, that would be my modified folder. Now this was the file we were looking at. And if you have a look, this line, starting with set range on starting date, is marked as the first line of the modified code block, and this line with added comment is the actual code change. So if you have a look at the delta file again, so this is the modified code block and this is the actual modification. Now let's have a look at another file. So here we have several changes. One is the added field. Then we have some changes in documentation trigger, and finally a version list change. So if we look at the same file in kdiff, so here we see the version list change, then the added field, and finally several changes in documentation trigger. First, this line is changed, and then another line is added. So if we look back at the subject, here is a block of code that is affected by the change, and here are actual changes. And now we will use the update commandlet to apply the changes to updated base application objects, that is, target application files. So type update NAV application object, and let's have a look at some of the parameters that commandlet uses. First, we'll provide the target path, and in our case, these are the files in the target folder. Next, we'll provide the delta path. Those are the files in delta folder. Then the result path, where the output files will be placed, and that will be in the result folder. Next, we can provide the datetime property, and this parameter has several values. We can choose current datetime. We can choose the datetime from the target files or from delta files, or choose the clear value of the parameter, which is the default value. This is what I will be using in this example, as we are specifying default value of the parameter. I can just skip that parameter and then select next parameter. That's the modified parameter. This parameter has values yes, no, from target or from delta files. In this example, I will be using no value. Next, we have the version list property parameter, and default value for this parameter is clear, so no version is set. We can also choose from target or from modified. In this case, I'll be using the default value of the parameter, so we can skip this one. Then we have the documentation conflict parameter. This parameter also takes several values. We can choose between strict, means that documentation conflicts will be handled as any other code conflicts. Then we can use modified first, which is the default value, or target first, meaning changes from the target files are listed first in the list of changes. This is what I'll be using. Then there's the strict parameter, that's a switch parameter. We use this if we want the commandlet to report all the conflicts, even non-functional ones, like for example order of the variables. So by default, the commandlet will not report that kind of conflicts to reduce the noise. Then there's the disable comment out switch, also switch parameter, that specifies if commandlet must not comment out merged code lines that cannot be imported into development environment. And finally, we'll be using the force parameter to overwrite any existing files in resulting folder without being prompted for that. So let's execute this. And here we see the summary of the completed process. Let's have a look at the resulting output. So all the processed objects are placed in the result folder, and we see one conflict file with unresolved conflict. If we go back to the summary, Here we can see that 4 objects have been updated, 1 has been reported with conflict, and 1 has been deleted. So we have a conflict in code unit 1, and let's have a look at the conflict file. The conflict is in application build procedure, and the hint is inlined in the source. So let's have a look at the code unit 1 and application build procedure. So here the conflict lines are outlined. Now let's assume that we want to resolve this conflict and that we want to keep the target file's build version. So I'll remove the rest and save the modified file. Let's take a minute to look at how the result type is calculated. This table describes how and when the result types are set by the update commandlet, depending on the input from modified and from target files. And looking back at our scenario, we have had 4 objects customized by Delta files and updated, and 1 more object resulting in the conflict. And we have had 1 object deleted in Delta files and unchanged by target files, and it was removed from the resulting output. Finally, once the conflicts are resolved, we will format the updated objects according to application designer guidelines. So we will use the set NAV application object properties commandlet to specify datetime and version list properties. So type set NAV application object, set target path, and that will be the result folder, and we'll filter on text files to avoid the conflict file. Next, we'll specify the version list property, as we want to update all updated objects with the same updated version. So I'll call that demo in this example. And finally, I'll specify the datetime property. Now, the datetime property must be set in the format that is local to the machine running the commandlet. You can retrieve that format by running getDate, add format parameter, and we use the value G, which refers to general format, that is short date and short time. For a full list of formats and values, you can run getHelp on a getDate commandlet. Next, we'll add the month parameter and specify a month, then the hour, and to comply with application design guidelines, the hour will be 12, and finally minute. Now let's execute this, and the objects have been updated. Let's just verify that. So if we open one of the objects, and the date, time, and version list is set as specified in the commandlet. Now the update scenario is complete, and as the last step, we'll import the updated objects into development environment. And for that we can use import NAV application object commandlet and set this path the result folder and text files. Database name is our upgraded target version. Execute that, confirm to overwrite existing files, and the import process is complete. Let's check the imported objects, and we can filter by version list. So 13 objects have been updated and import it. Let's revisit the steps that we have performed in order to enable this scenario. First, we have compared application objects from standard and customized database using the compare commandlet. Then we have reviewed the resulting Delta files and used the update commandlet to apply the changes to NAV application objects. Finally, we have used the set properties commandlet to finalize the object upgrade and format the updated application objects. Thank you for watching. I look forward to see you again in another episode of How Do I video series for Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015.